I'm Grant Walker. Welcome to Heads Up for Thursday the 7th of May. I'll also be back at 4 with Last Call. Transport news. Auckland car share company CityHop is staggered. Auckland Transport has decided to put out a national and international tender for an operator to bring 250 to 300 electric share vehicles to Auckland. CityHop founder Victoria Carter says it makes no sense to put the business out to tender. She said if there was a viable business for another car share operator in Auckland, they would be here right now. She says the only city where electric vehicle car share has worked successfully is Paris, which has more than 20,000 people per square kilometre. Paris, she says, had a billionaire who spent a fortune on importing electric vehicles. It's hard to imagine anyone doing that for Auckland. After 7 years in business, CityHop has just 25 cars in city parking buildings that are available on an hourly basis for anybody who has a short trip to make. More than 250 Auckland businesses use the cars and companies substitute them for fleet vehicles. Ms Carter says the business is growing incrementally. Despite lobbying for on-street car share parks and winning a tender, she says there's been little support from AT. According to AT, Process demands the electric vehicle proposition go to tender to increase car share. It seems a ridiculous waste of money to look offshore. If AT wants to grow car sharing, it could work with CityHop to gather car manufacturers, electricity companies and sustainable business groups to develop a collaborative initiative. Car sharing is a concept that's taken off in other cities. Zipcar, the world's biggest, is a listed company. New York has 5 car share operators because of its density. Sydney has 3, and Ms Carter says Auckland is so small it can't sustain more than one operator. She says Sydney City Council provides more than 700 on-street parks to the 3 car share companies, with the view one car share vehicle can take 15 privately owned cars off the road, as residents and businesses are given choices on how to move around. In market news, an unusual censure handed down to big sharebroker First New Zealand Capital has been met with a shrug by some market players, even as others play up its gravity. First New Zealand was fined $15,000 on Wednesday after the Stock Exchange's Markets Disciplinary Tribunal found it had failed to notify the NZX of a trading error last July, causing a 14% drop in a company's share price. The tribunal refused to name the listed company affected, saying it was not relevant to the disciplinary issue. The tribunal said the firm's attempt to fix the problem itself rather than own up was a matter of serious concern. It went on, the practice of market participants taking matters into their own hands has the potential to impact on market integrity and bring both the market and NZX into disrepute. Market sources said First New Zealand was a major broker responsible for about 30% of market trades, which may have tempted it to seek a solution in-house. To be honest, the source said, it's an occupational hazard that goes with the territory. It's a mountain out of a molehill. The only thing you could critique them on was not having constraints in place. Another said it was much ado about nothing, just a simple error that can occur in a busy market. According to the censure, First New Zealand received an order from a client to sell stock at market through its direct market access automated facility, a system allowing institutional clients to place trades straight into the market. The order was rejected by the DMA because it was set to prevent trades that would cause a price movement of more than 3%, so it went to the firm's trading desk where it was mistakenly put to the market in full. The error led to trades that pushed the stock's price from $3.13 to $2.70, whereupon First New Zealand placed buy orders to restore the stock price. Although accepting that mistakes can occur, the tribunal said it was very concerned that First New Zealand did not tell NZX about it. It said FNZ's failure to do so meant that NZX was unable to formulate an appropriate regulatory response. This failure was further aggravated by FNZ's subsequent actions in seeking to restore the market itself. Other market sources took a similar line. One said non-reporting of issues in financial markets is a big thing. If a trader covers up, you have to sack the trader. Another said the censure was understandable. If it's about not reporting a muck-up, I can see why the NZX would be quite concerned about that. The size of trades involved, where a sell order for 8,194 shares moved the market, indicates one of the less liquid stocks was involved. One potential candidate is retailer Hallenstein Glasson, whose share price on the day in question closed at $3.12 on volume of 15,050. Hallenstein's company's secretary could not immediately be reached for comment. So just what do CFOs think? Well, New Zealand's chief financial officers are significantly less enthusiastic about their company's financial prospects now than they were last year, which may be a reflection of overseas economic trends. A recent Deloitte survey of 133 CFOs from a range of business sizes, industries and locations shows 46% are somewhat more optimistic or significantly more optimistic about their company's financial prospects compared to 3 months before. But this is significantly down from 58% in 2014, although still up from 37% in 2013. Those in charge of the purse strings are more worried about higher than normal levels of external financial and economic uncertainty, with 45% of CFOs saying they were concerned, up from 36% last year, although down from 64% in 2013. Only half believe the time is right for taking greater risk onto their balance sheets. Deloitte audit partner Peter Gulliver told NBR Radio that CFO's cautious attitude may be driven by the rebound in macroeconomic uncertainty. He said CFOs have usually got one eye on the domestic economic conditions, which by and large are pretty positive, and one eye on the international situation where there are more headwinds. He says there's slowdown in growth from our second largest trading partner China, and our largest trading partner Australia is also facing difficulties. Our dollar against the Australian dollar is really high, which won't be helping exports. Lingering issues with European debt and falling commodity prices also mean CFOs are less exuberant than last year. Domestically, interest rates and unemployment levels are low, but growth is mainly focused in Auckland and Christchurch. Mr. Gulliver says the regions are not benefiting from these economic conditions to the same extent, so businesses with exposure to these areas are a bit more cautious. So it would depend on where the CFO's company does business as to how they're seeing the domestic growth story.
NBR Radio with the Property Press. It's out now to show you around.
To the dairy industry, Southern Operations Manager Richard Gray says Fonterra's expansion project at the world's largest dairy processing site at Edendale, Southland, is on track. The first of the 3 new plants will be commissioned in early August in time for the start of the new dairy season. The project includes a new MPC or milk protein concentrate plant, a reverse osmosis plant and an AMF anhydrous milk fat plant. When the new plants are added to the existing operation, it will increase processing capacity by 1.4 million litres per day and lift cream processing capacity to 550,000 litres per day. The expansion project, which started last September, is to cater for the continuing milk production growth across the South Island, and it would increase processing capacity to a total of 16 million litres per day. This would be broadly similar to the total daily average milk production in Ireland from March to September. About 1,500 dairy farmers supply milk to Fonterra's Edendale and Stirling processing plants. Business. Fuji Xerox New Zealand is creating a 6,400 square metre logistics hub at Auckland Airport. The company is moving its technology centre to the Landing Business Park. Managing Director Gavin Pollard says the facility will become the main logistics hub for the company's New Zealand operation. He says the decision to move was an easy one because of the amenities and the accessible location. He said it was critical we found a location providing easy access to the Auckland region, to New Zealand and the rest of the world. We were impressed with the scale and quality of the airport's developments, in particular the planning and investment. Mr. Pollard says this enables Fuji Xerox to showcase its latest technologies as well as cater for the needs of its staff and clients. Employment news. Soaring migration levels and low price inflation are keeping wage pressures low while participation rate and hours work continue to climb. Unemployment remains sticky at 5.8%, the same level as the previous quarter, but the labour force participation rate is at 69.6% of the population, the highest since the Household Labour Force Survey began in 1986. Among the batch of labour market data released by Statistics New Zealand this morning, perhaps the most important is the hours worked. These grew 2.7% for the year to March, coming off the annual peak of a 4.6% increase to March last year, but still sizable. In terms of the actual number of hours, growth has been something of a tear since 2013. Behind this are some big shifts in the labour market. The number of jobs grew by 73,000 year on year to March. The combination of a swelling labour force and low price inflation means wage inflation is also lower than expected, 0.3% for the quarter instead of an average market forecast of 0.4%. That takes the labour costs index, which measures the increase in the costs to employers, to 1.7% for the year. The data was softer, to use the jargon, than some were expecting. The average market forecast was for a 5.5% rather than 5.8% unemployment figure, as well as slightly higher labour cost rises. That could tilt the Reserve Bank closer to the interest rate cut Governor Graham Wheeler suggested is now, for the first time since the Canterbury earthquakes in early 2011, being seriously considered. Price inflation remains low, and the Consumer Price Index measure of inflation will almost definitely dip into deflation in the next quarter. The strength in the hours worked, however, points to continued solid economic growth.
NBR Radio with Bayleys, New Zealand's leading commercial real estate company.
To the wine industry, Geeson Wines has added its first external brand into its distribution business with an agency for Barossa Valley's Peter Lehmann wines. The Peter Lehmann label is owned by Casilla Family Brands, which is best known for its success in the US market with Yellowtail, the first of the Critter wines. Theo Geeson says the two companies share many similarities. He says our wine portfolios complement each other in a market dominated by New Zealand and Australian wines. Peter Lehmann is an iconic Australian brand, bringing a rich heritage and range of quality Barossa wines. Geeson will begin distributing a selection of the Peter Lehmann wines to the market, including Art and Soul, Portrait, Clancy's, Futures, and the much-awarded Peter Lehmann Masters series. In advertising, the biggest car advertiser, as rated by Nielsen Rate Cards, has appointed independent creative advertising agency Special Group to its creative advertising account. Holden, which spent approximately $16.2 million on advertising last year, started the tender process in November. 4 agencies took part, including Y&R, FCB and incumbent Ogilvy and Mather. Earlier this year, the pitch came down to Special and FCB. In an unusual move, both agencies were required to produce work that was shown to the public. Holden marketing manager Maureen Samfier told NBR Radio Special won the account due to a better cultural fit, but congratulated FCB, saying it's an unbelievably good agency. She says Holden, which is owned by General Motors, enjoyed a good relationship with Ogilvy, but people changes led to it pulling out. She refers to the controversial departure of Executive Creative Director Angus Henner and Group Account Director Sandra Daniel, as covered by NBR. Ms. Samfier says the work is only as good as the people delivering it in the end, so it would have been interesting had we stayed and the pitch process not kicked off what would have happened with a different team. Special managing partner Michael Redwood says the pitch was a good process and innovative. Senior agency sources estimate the long pitches such as Holden's often hit the wallets of agencies hard, regularly north of $100,000. Mr. Redwood admits this is not inaccurate. Ms. Samfier praised Ogilvy for creating the 60-year anniversary campaign. Holden is required by General Motors to pitch its account every 3 years, and Ogilvy held it for the past 8. Ms. Samfier says much of Holden's advertising is driven through the launch of new cars, so a lot of work is retail-driven. She says occasionally you will throw in brand work such as the 60 years, but those ones don't come up too often. Furthermore, she says a lot of advertising is sourced from Australia. Carrara holds Holden's media account and Haystack leads the PR. To politics and state houses. Labour's housing spokesman Phil Twyford says the government's sale of a further 1,600 state houses will do nothing to fix the housing crisis or improve tenants' lives. National has announced it's selling the properties in Tauranga and Invercargill as part of its program to get out of state housing. They'll be sold to registered community housing providers, according to a media statement signed by Ministers Bill English and Paula Bennett. Mr English cites efficiencies as a reason for the sell-off, but he does not identify any of the housing providers who are lining up to buy the properties. In January, Prime Minister John Key announced the government would transfer up to 2,000 state houses to community providers this year. The recent transfer of 2,800 state houses to a Tamaki housing provider included a government $200 million loan to help with working capital. The next step is to consult with iwi and Hapu in the two regions to identify any interests under the Treaty of Waitangi before deciding whether to proceed to market sounding. Mr Twyford says selling state houses won't make them more livable. He says the government has no evidence to support their claim that social housing providers can do a better job of managing state houses than Housing New Zealand.
NBR Radio. With Clooney Restaurant, an unparalleled private dining room choice. NBR Radio.
To tourism. New Zealand has slipped down 4 places in the world rankings of the best countries for tourism after being one of the best improvers in the previous survey. The fall from 12th to 16th in the World Economic Forum's 2015 Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index reflects a low ranking in 4 of the 14 key indicators. Price competitiveness, 117 puts of 141. Health and hygiene, we were 54. Ground and port infrastructure, 49. And cultural resources and business travel, we were 43. The strongest indicators in which New Zealand finished in the top 10 are international openness, 3rd, human resources and labour market, 6th, safety and security, 7th, business environment, 8th, and environmental sustainability, 10th. In the 2013 report, New Zealand rose from 19 to 12. The 529-page Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report, subtitled Growing Through Shocks, reveals how well countries could deliver sustainable economic and societal benefits through their travel and tourism sector. Spain ranks top for the first time after climbing to 4th in the 2013 index and from 8th prior to that. Traditionally strong travel and tourism destinations such as France, Germany, US, UK, Switzerland, Australia, Italy, Japan and Canada complete the top 10. In Asia Pacific, New Zealand's 3rd ranking in 2013 has slipped to 5th behind Australia, Japan, Singapore and Hong Kong. Of the large emerging markets, China, 17th and Brazil, 28th, made it into the top 30, whereas Russia, South Africa and India ranked 45, 48 and 52nd respectively. The United Arab Emirates, 24th, was the highest placed nation in the Middle East and North Africa. The biennial report identifies areas where tourism-oriented economies could do better in adapting to changing global trends as well as growing market segments. These include a growing number of middle-class travellers from emerging and developing countries, senior consumers and the backpacking millennials generation. It also finds a need for travel-reliant economies to adapt faster to online services and marketing as mobile internet continues to define the way travellers select, plan and review their trips. To recent land sales, Austrian property investor Robert Eric Hasseltiner has acquired a 486-hectare sheep and beef farm at 570 Matangi Road, Havelock North. He plans to develop and improve the farming operation and provide erosion control. The substantial and identifiable benefit to New Zealand criteria of the Overseas Investment Office was satisfied by reference to the following factors: jobs, investment for development, trout, salmon, wildlife and game, historic heritage, walking access and an offer to sell Riverbed to the Crown. The consideration for the purchase remains secret, but it has a 2013 rateable value of $5.1 million. Christchurch's Christ College has sold more than 2,000 hectares to Kiwi Forest Investment, a subsidiary of Golden World International of Hong Kong. The properties include 818 hectares at Puranui Forest, Wairarapa, 815 hectares at Maringi Forest and 732 hectares at Putinka Forest, also both of them in the Wairarapa. The price was kept secret. Meanwhile, Japanese investors via a company called Becom New Zealand have acquired an 11-hectare vineyard in central Otago known as Bald Hills, a boutique vineyard planted with 7 hectares of grapevines. The Japanese Mita family plans to expand the vineyard by planting an additional 2 hectares of grapevines and export the majority of the wine to overseas markets such as Japan. The price paid for Bald Hills was $2,878,000. UK investors Justin and Kirsty McTaggart acquired 8.9 hectares at Ellen Johnson Terrace, Lake Hayes, Queenstown, together with a 60th share as tenants in common in 149.2296 hectares of land at Marshall Avenue, Lake Hayes, Queenstown, for $2.5 million. They say they will restore and make additions to the historic Threepwood homestead to make it suitable as a long-term residence, as well as fund and facilitate a wetland restoration project at Lake Hayes. Social media and the liquor industry. Alcohol brand Isaac Cider says it makes sure the followers on one of its social media platforms are not underage by going through their photos. In a recent decision from the Advertising Standards Authority, Isaac's, which is owned by Lion, says it regularly reviews its Instagram followers and blocks them if they aren't over 18. Lion says acceptable proof was, for example, a photo of a person in a restricted environment such as a bar or other R18 event or the mention of a birthday. Any use of an associated hashtag is also reviewed and reported. Lion says every possible step was taken to prevent any person under 18 following the Instagram account and therefore to minimise the exposure of any person under 18 to the Instagram advertisement. The admission from Isaacs came after it appealed an ASA decision which upheld a complaint that its 100 Days of Isaacs campaign had breached alcohol advertising codes by displaying ads on Instagram, a site that currently has no age restriction functionality. The industry watchdog acknowledged that Isaacs conducted rigorous checking on its followers to ensure they were in fact over 18 years old and reversed the initial ruling. The Instagram page currently has 181 followers.
NBR. Need to hire? Try our online recruitment platform. www.nbrtalent.co.nz.
I'm Grant Walker with Heads Up. Here's what's trending on NBR Online. The IRD to target banks. Another public-private school announcement. Rod Duke talks Briscoes. So who from overseas has bought what land and where recently? Gießen Wines boosts its distribution arm. Edendale on track for Fonterra, but has Synlait just changed things in China? And who's just won the Holden advertising account? If you're travelling today, Auckland a little bit wet and then wetter. Wellington wet and windy. Christchurch and Dunedin fine. To find out more on our stories, log on to nbr.co.nz or stay tuned. Those stories coming up next on NBR Radio. While you were sleeping, US stocks, bonds and the dollar slid after Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen warned valuations were quite high, while weaker than expected private jobs data added to recent data suggesting the central bank might not lift interest rates as soon as thought. Wall Street's decline deepened after Yellen's comments on a panel in Washington. In late trading in New York, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 0.78%, the S&P 500 declined 0.71%, and the Nasdaq shed 0.78%. Yellen also warned that bond yields could see a sharp jump when the Fed raises its benchmark interest rate. US Treasuries declined, pushing yields on the 30-year bond 8 basis points higher to 2.99%. Both the Fed chief's comments and the weaker-than-expected private jobs report increased the focus on Friday's government payrolls data amid persistent signs that the pace of US growth is weakening. On Wednesday, an ADP Research Institute report showed US companies hired 169,000 workers in April, short of the 200,000 economists had expected. In Europe, the Stoxx 600 finished the session with a 0.6% decline. The UK's FTSE rose 0.1%, while both France's CAC 40 and Germany's DAX gained 0.2%. In Greece, the ASE index rallied 2.9%. The country is facing a key deadline on debt repayment on May 12, and the pace of progress in negotiations with its international lenders appears glacial. Meanwhile, Eurozone bonds fell amid concern about rising oil prices, which hit their highest level this year, and the uncertainty surrounding a Greek deal. In education news, according to Education Minister Hekia Parata, a $298 million private-public school partnership will relieve teachers of maintenance concerns. Last week, she signed the $298 million contract with the Future Schools Partners Consortium to finance, design, construct and maintain Ormiston Junior College in Auckland, Aranui Community Campus and Rolleston Secondary Schools in Canterbury and Wakatipu High School in Queenstown. The move builds on National's wider property program, which includes privatising state housing. National says the private-public model would save taxpayers approximately $27 million compared with traditional procurement over the next 25 years. The project is the second of its type for the FSP Consortium, which delivered the new primary and secondary schools at Hobsonville Point in Auckland. The consortium will also be responsible for school maintenance for 25 years before the buildings are handed back to the ministry. The Ormiston, Rolleston and Aranui schools will open early in 2017, while Wakatipu High School will open in 2018. Morrison & Co.'s Public Infrastructure Partners Fund will provide equity to the consortium, made up of Hawkins Group for Design and Construction, ASC Architects and Programmed Faculty Management. The Public Infrastructure Partners Fund was established by New Zealand infrastructure investment manager Morrison & Company to invest in social infrastructure assets through private-public partnerships. Money in the fund came from various investors, including the New Zealand Superannuation Fund and local community trusts and institutional investors. In addition, the New Zealand Social Infrastructure Fund was established in 2010 to enable smaller New Zealand investors to participate in the PIP fund. To the dairy industry, Synlait's new infant formula brand on the Chinese market is understood to be selling for about 1/4 of the price of its competitors, leading one agri-food professor to liken it to the arrival of Ford's Model T. Produced in tandem with New Hope Nutritionals and launched in China on April 1 via one of China's largest online retailers, JD.com, Synlait's Akarola infant formula is sold exclusively online, thereby bypassing the traditional distribution costs of middlemen. A 900-gram can of Akarola retails in China for around $21 New Zealand dollars, while similar quality 900-gram cans of infant formula can retail there for the equivalent of around $80. It's understood the price difference has traditionally been soaked up by multi-layered Chinese middlemen rather than pocketed by Western infant formula producers. A Synlait spokesman says we're not in a position to provide details or statistics about sales, But what we can say is that a broader range of families can now afford infant formula products without sacrificing quality. Agribusiness consultant and Lincoln University honorary professor of agri-food systems, Keith Woodford, says there's a lot of infant formula sold online in China, but what most companies have not done is made that their main channel of distribution, or if they have then, they've just been marketing it at a similar price to the shops. He adds that in recent years, infant formula in China has been selling to consumers at over 3 times the standard international price. Professor Woodford says, I use the analogy of Henry Ford and the Model T. Henry used a method of production that brought the whole cost down to within the reach of almost every man in America, and that changed the car market. It was the first car built using a production line, and then everyone else followed. In terms of management and marketing strategy, Synlay's Akarola is a similarly disruptive strategy. As a new entrant, he said, they've decided their position is going to be a top-quality product from New Zealand, and they will rely on price and scale to give them profit. It's understood Chinese dairy company Yashili has responded to the move by declaring it will start selling its 900-gram cans of infant formula for no more than around 23 New Zealand dollars later this month.
NBR Radio with Hotel de Brett, partying since 1959. www.hoteldebret.com. NBR Radio.
Business news. Briscoe Group's homewares chain hasn't caught the same malady depressing the results of most other retailers. That's despite the homewares business first quarter sales growth slowing to just 0.52%, the third successive quarter in which its sales momentum has slowed from 6.29% growth in the second quarter of last year. Managing Director and major shareholder Rod Duke says it's all about the weather. Mr. Duke says it's been a very, very slow start to winter. The market is as relentlessly competitive and everyone's had the same experience in this category. Cold weather would mean customers would buy more relatively high-priced winter goods such as heaters and duvet inners. He hastens to add that he doesn't believe the unseasonably warm weather has cost Briscoe's any market share and that the chain has increased its profit margins again. Mr. Duke said, what that tells you is there's some margin left if I choose to go out and chase sales more aggressively, but we've chosen to do the best we can with the weather hand we've been dealt and to increase margins, perhaps at the cost of some sales. Mr. Duke says he's got his powder pretty dry. He said, if I want 3.5% same-store sales growth next quarter, I can get it. It just might cost me a few points in margins. By contrast, the group's other chain, Rebel Sport, lifted its first quarter sales nearly 11%, an acceleration from just over 7% in the fourth quarter last year. That took overall sales for the first quarter to $114.8 million, up 4.3% on the same quarter last year. Mr. Duke says Rebel Sport's margins expanded in the quarter, meaning profit is tracking ahead of last year. Tax news. Moves to reap more tax from offshore-owned banks and other entities are to be unveiled today. NBR Radio understands Inland Revenue is about to release a set of proposals aimed at gathering more non-resident withholding tax from banks and other offshore-owned New Zealand firms. The moves will be badged as part of the global crackdown on profit shifting by multinational firms, dubbed BEPS or BEPS, or base erosion and profit shifting, being pushed hard by the OECD. If implemented, it's understood multi-billion-dollar amounts of bank funding not currently caught by the tax net could be added to the country's tax base. At the same time, changes will push up the cost of bank funding in New Zealand and probably lead to either the banks taking a haircut on their profits or in higher retail interest rates, or most likely a combination of the two. For the New Zealand Tax Authority, this long predates the BEPS issue and has been on the wish list since at least 2008. There are 3 core concerns identified in a cabinet paper late last year: inadequate coverage of when NRWT is deducted, leakage around the associated person test, and payments to firms operating a New Zealand branch not fully covered by the rules. The Australian-owned banks are in the direct line of the IRD's fire. There are exemptions to NRWT, but one of them under current rules can be claimed by non-resident firms to lend to their New Zealand subsidiaries without needing to pay NRWT or treat the interest as income of the New Zealand branch, provided the parent company operates a branch in New Zealand. Another loophole that looks like being closed allows firms to defer paying the NRWT until interest on loans is actually paid. In some cases, it may be possible to create debt instruments where the terms are such that there is indefinite deferral of the obligation to pay NRWT, officials told ministers late last year. Banking news, sort of. Another clash between a major bank and victims of online banking fraud has settled, leaving the law unclear. The case between Distribution Control and ANZ is the latest in a series of online banking fraud cases brought by lawyer John Waugh since 2010. Electrical switchboard manufacturer Distribution Control was the victim of about $1 million in online fraud, and its employee Patricia Hurley was convicted for the offending. Distribution Control then went after ANZ, saying its electronic banking systems did not do what ANZ said they would. Although the trial kicked off on Monday in the High Court at Auckland before Justice Matthew Muir, Distribution Control sought a discontinuance later that day. The case had been expected to take about a week. Mr. Waugh has been involved in 4 electronic banking cases since 2010, which have all settled. He's unable to comment while the settlement is finalised. A common feature of the cases is the allegation that because banks do not cross-check the name and number of a payee in electronic transactions, this leaves the process open to fraud by company employees who enter the correct name but a different account number. An ANZ spokesman said in a statement it's pleased with the outcome, which included Distribution Control paying $30,000 towards costs. The spokesman says New Zealand banks work hard to prevent their customers from becoming victims of any kind of financial crime, and cases of staff fraud within businesses are very rare. The spokesman went on, businesses can help themselves reduce the chance of fraud by avoiding giving specific employees sole or unfettered authority to manage business accounts and payments without recourse to internal checks or audit functions.
NBR. With a National Business Review smartphone subscription, you can read or listen to the latest from NBR online. And for a limited time, it's free. Join NBR's Intelligent Business Network today and get free smartphone access to NBR online until August 31st. NBR doesn't do sport, weather or horoscopes, just timely, relevant, useful and insightful business news. So for business news you can use for free, visit nbr.co.nz/free.